Everybody, welcome to this morning's Let's Talk session where we'll be listening to Antle discuss budgeting at Christmas. We'd like to thank the RBC Foundation for sponsoring our Let's Talk sessions. And I'd also like to mention that we're pleased to have our CEO, Kimberly Leonard, here with us today. So thanks for joining us, Kimberly. And like I said, just a few housekeeping things, and then I'll go ahead and hand it over to Al. So, just a few small things. We ask that everybody mutes their mic to block any outside noise that they might have. If you need captioning, there's a button for it at the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions or comments, you can go ahead and put those in the chat, and then we'll have some time at the end to talk about those. And just so everybody is aware, the session is being recorded, and the session will also be posted on YouTube, just in case anybody can't make it today so that others can see it as well. Before we get started, I'd also like to do a land acknowledgement. So I'm going to go ahead and read that for us. We respectfully acknowledge that the lands on which we live, work, and meet are situated on the traditional territories of the Indigenous groups of Newfoundland and Labrador, and we acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. We honor the diverse Indigenous peoples who have cared for this land for the past generations and for the 7 generations to come. We are committed to listening, learning, and working in collaboration with Indigenous communities as we move towards reconciliation, respect, and mutual understanding. Let us carry this acknowledgement forward in our work and relationships as we strive to create a future that respects and embraces the wisdom of older adults and the diversity of all communities. So I'll hand it over to Al. So Christmas is right around the corner, and already many of us are shopping for those things we just had to get for loved ones and friends. Often, however, those gifts come at a cost more than we can afford, and the temptation is just too much to resist sometimes. I bet those loved ones and friends wouldn't want us to go into debt because we're buying things for them, be it for Christmas or for a birthday. And for here to talk a little bit more about that and to discuss some helpful advice on spending Christmas money is Al Antle. So Al, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Courtney. This is a golden opportunity. I'm delighted, thrilled. So they told me that I needed to start off with a bit of a bio, so here goes. 20 seconds or less. My name is Al Antle. I am I'm still getting used to saying that, the retired founding executive director of Credit Counselling Newfoundland, Labrador, and Credit Counselling Canada. Uh, Credit Counselling Newfoundland and Labrador is a community-based agency that delivers financial counseling, advocacy, and intervention services for residents of Newfoundland and Labrador. And Credit Counselling Canada is an umbrella organization of all the not-for-profit credit counseling agencies in the country. And our job is to advocate with financial institutions and to secure cooperation with proposals for the repayment of debt on behalf of clients of credit counseling services. Uh, my background, academic training, the University of, I'm sorry, I have to get used to saying this, Ryerson Polytechnic University. I have to get used to calling it by its new name, but in any event, I am bankruptcy and insolvency certified through Ryerson Polytechnical Institution, and I studied financial counseling at the University of Guelph. In my career, 42 years and 3 months, I provided financial counseling and assistance to 43,000 Newfoundland and Labrador families. So it was a real privilege to work with what I refer to as the salt of the earth. Uh, it's, I think, reasonably safe to say that the majority of my clients while I was working were married families, however, or coupled families. However, second line and very closely behind would be seniors, and particularly senior women. So I've talked to a lot of individuals about their finances and about the quandaries they find themselves in and the stress they feel with trying to cope with these bits and pieces of what the world perceives as a normal life. If you have debt, then you have these problems. Well, you shouldn't have these problems if you have debt. Debt is a choice, and it shouldn't. We shouldn't have to go hungry to pay our debts. So, in any event, uh, today we're going to be talking primarily about coping in Christmas. However, it would be unreasonable, I believe, and unfair for me to not give you a sense of the kinds of situations that people are living with. And generally speaking, when I start these presentations, I like to start by telling a story, a true story, about a case. And I do that, I hope, without violating anybody's privacy or confidence. And it's interesting because in many situations we learn, and we learn a great deal from the experiences of other people and how they coped with their individual situation. So let me tell you about Ruth. Now, Ruth is not her real name, but we're going to call her Ruth. And Ruth is, I will call, a surviving spouse who lives in a small town in rural Newfoundland, central rural Newfoundland. Ruth and her husband had a wonderful life. They were happily married. They had four children. Their children were all successful. Two of their four children, who are now in their 40s, live on the mainland, and two live reasonably close by. When I say reasonably, I'm talking an hour, hour and 15 minutes away, to where Ruth lives now. They had a great life. They owned their house. They always had a nice car. They went on a vacation every year. Her favorite part of the world is Clearwater, Florida. She enjoyed herself tremendously. They enjoyed themselves tremendously, and life was great. In addition to that, when they both retired, and they both worked, when they both retired, they managed to get 11 years. And I say managed to get 11 years because, as many of you know, people retire and a year later they're struck down. But they managed to get 11 years um, together, happily enjoying life before one of them was about to be struck down. And Ruth's husband was diagnosed as having cancer. Um, at this point, it's been years ago now. And they were hopeful that he would survive and he would make it, but unfortunately he did not. And as the end drew close, he expressed concern to Ruth about her finances and her particular situation and her needs, her practical needs, when he would be gone. And one of the concerns he expressed was her mobility. And I don't mean mobility around the house, I mean mobility in the community and mobility in the region. They live in a small town, about, I'll tell you, it's an hour and 10 minutes from Grand Falls. Grand Falls being their major center for their doctor's appointments, their shopping, their banking, et cetera, et cetera. And he expressed concern that she would not be able to get there um, when he was gone. Uh, they lived in a car, and they didn't live in a car. They had a car. It wasn't a new vehicle. It was a 7-year-old vehicle, but it was well maintained, and it was a good vehicle when they had it. Uh, he was concerned that Ruth would not be able to get around when he was gone. So he felt they needed a newer vehicle, and B, an upgraded vehicle, so that in wintertime she wouldn't have to worry about being on the road and so on and so forth. So they went out and they bought a new vehicle. That was great planning, great planning. However, neither of them, nor did any of their children, stop to look at the change that would happen to Ruth's finances when her husband passed. While they both received OASCPP and a private pension, her husband's pension was one of these things that when he passed, his pension passed. He would not continue to receive any income. Uh, so they park this new vehicle in the driveway, and 3.5 months later, he dies. And 2 months later, so he's been gone for 2 months, she discovers that she can't afford this vehicle. She can't afford the monthly payment because her income uh, is inadequate, simply inadequate to make the monthly payment. And she doesn't know what to do. In addition to a new car payment of just under $500 a month, she's also coping with three credit cards that they had had most of their life. And the cumulative debt on the three credit cards was just under $12,000. Uh, in 2024, $12,000 is not an outrageous amount of money. It's a lot, but it's not outrageous. We would see significantly more than that every day. The challenge that Ruth was coping with is three credit cards with annual rates of interest of 21.9% in one case, 19.8 in another, and 20.0 in the third. So the part of the problem for Ruth was making these monthly payments and seeing a change in her monthly balance with the payments she was in a position to make. So uh, she came and she had a conversation with us, and we felt that she couldn't afford the vehicle. She wasn't prepared to get rid of the vehicle. She felt that she would be um, smiting her husband's memory to trade what she referred to as his car. Um, so we ended up doing what we call a debt management program for Ruth. In other words, we went off to her creditors and we arranged to have the interest on the loans reduced and the payments amended to suit her monthly payment. I guess, I don't work in credit counseling any longer, but one of the most important things that I would want to project from this particular presentation is that credit counseling services in all provinces in Canada can arrange to have interest this is the only way you're going to get the bank to forgive the interest on your loan is through a not-for-profit credit counseling arrangement. Uh, Now, Ruth could have gone bankrupt. A lot of people said, well, why didn't she just go bankrupt? Well, she could have gone bankrupt. And yes, that is always an option for consumers. However, the vehicle would have to be forfeited. And there would have been a monthly payment to what's called the bankrupt estate, and she would have died of embarrassment. And all of these things fit into the consideration of the not-for-profit credit counseling sector and form the basis of the decision for decision for decision for decision to go into a debt management program. So what Ruth is now facing is that for roughly 3.5 years, um, she's going to pay a specific amount to the credit counseling service. She has no access to credit while she's in that program, but the car is safe in the driveway, and she is well, she's got an income of about $2,300 a month by the time she pays her expenses. Uh, she's got none of that left. So after she pays her debt and her car payment every month, she still has in the range of $1,800 to live on. And Ruth feels that she's doing okay with that right now. So that's Ruth's story. And that's typical of the kinds of situations that I was dealing with when I was working in credit counseling. But we're here to talk about Christmas. We're here to talk about, an otherwise joyful time of year and a time of year when it's almost expected to be chin and ears in and fully participating and fully consuming. And that's great. However, seniors' finances are not conducive to being, generally speaking, seniors' finances are not conducive to that kind of active participation in uh, an economy and in a season like Christmas. Uh, on average, we spend about $1,000 on what I'll call Christmas stuff. Um, That's great. It stimulates the economy. It makes us feel better. It gets us out, so on and so forth. But if we don't have that $1,000, it stresses us to the max and creates a liability for us for other parts of the year and other sources of income become stressed as we attempt to repay these things. Furthermore, if we've made the decision to spend that $1,000 on debt or through debt, we've added the cost of carrying charges to the overall payments that we're going to have to make when this thing is signed, sealed, and delivered. So we try and suggest to people another way of coping with Christmas or another way of doing things that either doesn't cost you as much or that makes your ability to consume these goods and services a little more or a little less stressful for you. The first thing we try and get our head around and get your head around is the idea of why we do what we do at Christmas. Why is it that my wife and I are sitting down probably 3 to 4 times a week now, and have been for the last 3 to 4 weeks, and will be for the next 3 to 4 weeks, and saying to ourselves, what are we going to get the girls for Christmas? What will we give the girls? What in effect are we saying by having that conversation? We're in effect saying to the recipient, I love you this much. This is how much I love you. I'm giving you this gift, and it's a nice gift, and it was expensive, or it was hard to find, or it was sent from Timbuktu. You know, we're affirming our affection for the individuals by providing this particular piece of comfort to them. And that's critically important in any relationship we have in this world. We have to reaffirm and affirm each other to each other and make sure that we understand our place in a family unit. Uh, However, I'm not sure there's a dollar sign with that affirmation. And I haven't been sure that there was a dollar sign with that affirmation from very, very early on in my career. I spent 42 years in financial counseling, and I think I learned probably by Christmas number three that people overdo it and they don't know that they don't have to. So we're saying to people, find another way to affirm your affection for somebody other than by spending $200 or $150 or $20, whatever the number might be. And one of the best ways to do that is to be as non-traditional in your gifting as you possibly can. And what do I mean by that? Well, do you remember when we were all younger how we everybody valued and treasured things that came from the soul and things that came from the heart more than things that came from Walmart? You know, my wife likes to bake, and she's a darn good baker. And in my family, my brothers and sisters literally can't wait for the cherry cake. And I come from a large family, a very, very large family. And if we were to buy gifts for everybody, it would probably cost us several $1,000s to buy something for everybody. But my wife makes this cherry cake, and it's absolutely the hit of the year. Uh, that's just one example. Another example of a way to provide a gift and an affirmation and a sign of affection at Christmas time is time. Time. So, have you given any thought to giving your children a weekend of babysitting? Not a night, something beyond the obvious. Something, you're going to say to your adult children, we're going to move into your house on Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, and you can go. And you don't need to come back till Sunday evening, 7 o'clock. That will be genuinely appreciated because it gives them a different kind of lifestyle for several days. Uh, you also can do things at Christmas time like um, provide practical assistance. For example, um, one of the things the city of St. John's had for years and years and years was parking permits. They were wonderful ideas. But when you're trying to find a gift for a senior citizen, something that's a real hit is postage stamps. Can you buy postage stamps for somebody? Can you go out to the post office and buy postage stamps? And we advocate that kind of gift because not only is it practical, but it's also cheaper. It doesn't cost you. You spend $20 on a book of postage stamps. It doesn't then cost you $3 to wrap that. We've elevated the business of gifting and the business of giving to the point where it doesn't make any sense. A $5 gift, a $10 gift is costing us $3 to wrap by the time we put on a bow and ribbon and paper and bags and stuffing and so on and so forth. So try and do things that are practical. One way to provide help to the community and to acknowledge the affection you feel for a family member or friend is to make a donation in their name. And that's something that not a lot of people think about. But if just for a moment. So it's Christmas. I need to buy 20 gifts. I don't have any money. I have maximum of $100. What can I buy for 20 people for $100? Probably very little. However, I can make a donation to a charity in the name of 20 people, and nobody knows how much I donated. So if I had $100 for 20 people and I wanted to make a donation to Seniors NL, I would simply provide the donation to Seniors NL, and I would ask Seniors NL, when you acknowledge this gift, you provide the following 20 people with an acknowledgement card which says that on December the 4th, 2024, Al Antle made a donation in your name to Seniors NL. That's your Christmas gift. Nobody knows you're poor, nobody knows you can't afford, but you did provide a gift for an individual. And then the other nice part of this is you get a charitable receipt from Seniors NL for the donation you made. So you in effect make Christmas tax deductible. Now that's a bit of a stretch, but I say it all the time. Uh, Christmas is so much more than just buying gifts and exchanging gifts and so on and so forth. The other thing that we have to cope with is we have to cope with uh, additional food. We have to cope with buying things like decorations. We have to cope with higher light bills because of, extra heat in our house and people coming by and the cost of running electricity and so on and so forth. All of these things collectively pick at our finances as well and make stressing us much more likely in the months of January, February, March. And, it's not unusual for us in credit counseling to see Christmas take till June, July, and sometimes August of the following year for people to finally get over. So in terms of preparing for food, we're suggesting to people that they acknowledge that Christmas is not one day of the year, that Christmas is 365 days of the year, and that they try and buy something, practically buy something in terms of food and consumables from every single pay period all year long. So, if you're going to buy, I don't know, if you're a baker, you buy supplies every time you go to the supermarket, as opposed to need to find $100 to go to the supermarket to buy baking supplies. We're suggesting that you take full advantage of sales. We're suggesting that you practically approach your finances. You practically approach the need for goods and services. You freeze what you're going to need when it's in season. Uh, we're suggesting as well that in terms of gifting, another way to gift people is to have somebody in for a meal. Now, that's not the cheapest way to do things, but it does cover you off and gets you two birds with one stone. A, it gets the gift, and B, it gets a meal. Uh, we worry, we worry about seniors, particularly about seniors, in terms of Christmas uh, and giving to charity, because people often get, they are guilted out. They feel badly. They feel that while their circumstance is tight, it's not as tight as somebody else's. So they feel a need to give something to a charity. When you're contributing to a charity, make sure that that charity provides you with a charitable receipt. Make sure as well that that charity is in fact a legitimate charity. There are many groups and organizations out there that will take your money and they're not doing what they said they were doing. You might also need to check out the organization in terms of how they spend your money. For example, what are the administrative costs of an organization? If you're making a contribution to an organization and you discover that you know 95% of what you contribute goes to administration. Now, nothing is ever black or white, and human resources are not cheap. but you need to be sure that the majority of your contribution is going to the program you intend to support. Uh, you also need to keep in mind that when it comes to charitable contributions, that that receipt is critically important, and it makes the contribution you've given tax deductible for you. You may want to have a conversation with whomever prepares your income tax about whether or not you make an annual deduction of your donation, or can that be deferred so that you make a deduction, say, every 3 years? Are you better served from a tax perspective to not have your charitable contribution deducted every year? The answer may be no, but the answer may be yes, and you need to ask that question. We have no way of knowing what each individual circumstance is until whomever is preparing the income tax return uh, actually does the return and it makes the deduction. Uh, in terms of coping with Christmas overall, you never start the season without a budget. And that budget doesn't come back to something you decide on December the 1st. That budget comes back to something you decide on January 1st. And if Christmas is going to cost you, and I'm plucking this number out of the air, this is not a suggestion that this is a good number, okay? But if Christmas is going to cost you $1,200 a year, and that's what you budget for Christmas, then you are budgeting $100 a month. And one of two things needs to happen in your financial life. Either you spend that $100 on items that will be consumed in the month of December at Christmas time, or you put the $100 in your bank account to be accessed in and of itself in December and spent on Christmas. But one of the biggest challenges we find is that people who have difficulty at Christmas time haven't got any monthly budget. They've got a crisis that happens on December 1st of each year, and they need to find money today. And that becomes the challenge. Now, this presentation could go on for hours talking about this topic, but I felt it was kind of more important to allow people in the room or people on the chat to ask questions, and we'll take it from there. Anybody have any questions? Anybody have any differences of opinion?
I don't think anyone can argue with anything you've been saying, Al, because it's all really common sense.
It is, but common sense is not that common. And
Well, that's true.
and stress and pressure to be something
Yeah,
removes our capacity to be practical. It removes our capacity to be practical. It's that's that very same emotion, and one conversation that I have with people or had with people all the time was funeral expenses. They clients are listing off their debts, and I discover that there's an
yeah.
$8,000 bill to XYZ funeral home. What's that for? Well, my mother died 5 years ago, and I looked after the arrangements. Well, are you an only child? No. Then why are you responsible for the liability? Because I took it on. I was stressed at the time, and I didn't want her to be put in a. I remember one lady said to me, "My worst fear was that my mother would go in a welfare box."
Oh,
So she so
okay.
she paid for a $12,000 funeral for her, and that's another example of the kind of decisions we make when we're under stress.
Yeah,
So if Christmas time comes into your world and you have no provision for it and you feel, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" then you're not going to make the best decisions simply because you're making decisions under stress.
yeah, yeah. That's so true. I recently was talking to someone who had a family member pass away, and all that person wanted was cremation. And cremation with no fanfare or not even an urn cost over $6,000. I mean, that's a lot of money
That's a
today.
lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's something you need to shop for. That's
Yep.
another that at the end of the day, that's just another consumer service.
Yep.
And in North America, I don't want to say we get it all wrong because that would be unfair and unkind. But, if you go to Europe, it's a completely different service, a completely different um, kind of experience or process. I remember 25 years ago for the first time um, going to a restaurant in Ontario. I traveled quite a bit when I worked. Going to a restaurant in Ontario, and beside the restaurant, and by the way, this was in Etobicoke on Queen Street, on the Queensview,
Yep.
on the Queensway, I'm sorry. And right next door to the restaurant we were going to was a place called the Casket Shop. So I said to the couple I was with, like, well, what is this? She said, well, we'll go in there afterwards. So we went in, and it was like Costco for the dead. You took a cart and you went around, you picked out the casket, you put it on the cart, and you could pick anything except the headstone. You could pick the headstone, but you had to find somebody to engrave it for you. And I was fascinated at the difference in cost. Like you would put together a funeral in the store for under $2,000. That's flowers, an outfit, whatever it is you want,
Wow.
programs for the service in the church, whatever, for under $2,000, that would probably cost you $8,000 using convention. And so I said, like, who uses this? Europeans, people who've migrated to Canada, who've had a loss, and they just can't cope with the cost of burying a loved one in this marketplace with this market style. So
Yep.
now how do we get from Christmas to funerals?
Exactly. Anybody have any questions, any comments for Al? I think everybody's probably home counting the money now.
Before we go, the one thing I do want to talk about though is um, in terms of buying groceries and food for Christmas, I am noticing more, and as well, probably as I age myself, I'm 70 years old this year. Um, it's really tough to be a consumer in St. John's. It's really tough to be a consumer in Newfoundland. Uh, the market, particularly the food system, is not designed for one person or two people. It's really tough to shop cheap. But one thing I've noticed is that Coleman's and Mount Pearl, and Coleman's does not pay me to say this, Coleman's and Mount Pearl tends to recognize that the bulk of their people are probably seniors. And I'm noticing that the packaging is smaller and consequently cheaper. And that's an enormously big deal because guess what? We Canadians throw out 27% of the food we buy. We throw it out. So the way to avoid throwing it out is to not buy it in the first place. So as you go out to shop for food, try and be sure that you're not over purchasing. One thing that we promoted, and I'm assuming the credit counseling service locally still promotes, is the idea or the notion of what we call food sharing. What does food sharing cost?
Yeah.
Well, my wife and I like to make lemon curd. And we will go over to Costco and we'll buy a bag of lemons for 9.95. There's probably 15 lemons in there. We're not going to use 15 lemons. We're going to use about nine of them, 10 of them maybe. So we will share the bag of lemons with my wife's sister rather than waste five lemons. And she will probably go out next week and buy a box of cereal that she's not going to use, and she will share that with us. Food sharing is a great way to save yourself some cost. The other thing that will save yourself some costs in terms of food is, and this is often not easy, but it is, it, you need to look and see if your circumstance is practical. And that is, can you prepare food and freeze it? On Saturday of last week, uh, we made some lasagna, and we have 17 meals of lasagna that we've frozen. Now, we can freeze, we have a big freezer. You may not have a big freezer, but the point is, can you do that? If you are forced by circumstance to buy large quantities because you can't find a supermarket that caters to you, remember to break down the food you're buying and freeze a portion of it before you cook it the first time, or after you cook, freeze at least one or potentially two meals for future use. And we tend to spend more money on food at Christmas time than any other time of the year.
Yeah.
Well, it's really important that we not throw that stuff out, that we actually get to consume it. Any other
That
questions? Differences of opinion, by the way. I mean, some of you may think I'm crazy, and you wouldn't, there's always another perspective.
Al, I have a question actually, about the Christmas budgeting piece. And just if there might not be an answer to this, but it's just kind of something I'm thinking about. When we're talking about how much to budget for Christmas and talking about maybe putting some away and deciding how much you are able to put away each month, starting with, say, January 1st. Is there like, say, I don't know, your monthly income is $3,000. Would you say there's like kind of a percentage of what you should be putting away or something that like you shouldn't be putting more than? Or does it kind of depend on the situation? Like, is there kind of a ballpark for that that you would say would be like not to cross, or what does that look like?
That is a brilliant question, Courtney, and I'm not, I don't have an answer,
Hmm.
but it's asked by every single consumer of themselves,
Yeah.
and it's asked of us in credit counseling on a regular basis.
Right,
You have an income of $3,000 a month and you're a family of two. What's your budget? You have an income of $3,000 a month and your family of six. What's your budget? It's a real challenge to approach it only in terms of the income.
right,
That it's a real challenge. Uh, and then there's the skills, the abilities, the likes, the dislikes. You know, again, I come from a large, large, large family, and we abandoned Christmas in terms of gifting each other 25 years ago, and we do a thing called Secret Santa. And we have Santa Claus in the family who on or around September 30th of each year will do he's got a computer program and he matches everybody and sends out, "Dear Al, your Secret Santa this year is Jim." And we've agreed that, we will buy maximum one person, maximum $50, maximum, and that's it. We do that. And then we get together on Christmas Eve night and we have Secret Santa. What we've discovered is that it's not about the gift, it's about the getting together. So
right,
this year what we're doing is we're not Secret Santa-ing people. Santa is collecting, and we're gonna look after two families for Christmas. So you'll find that as you get older, things evolve and things change, and the amount you put in is different. Now, one thing that credit counseling would promote, and still does promote, I'm assuming, and that is what we call the rule of 70%. So here's how the rule of 70% goes. Okay? It's predicated, completely predicated on the notion of having a budget. So let's say your budget is $1,000 a year. Okay? The rule of 70% is you take 70% of $1,000 and you spend it on the people who sleep in the same house you sleep in. So that's $700. You have $300 left. You take 70% of that and you spend on people for whom you feel a need to extend a gift but they're not people of your immediate family. So that's $210, and you have $90 left. You take 70% of that, which is roughly $65. That's what you spend on what I will call your Tim Hortons cards or your McDonald's card. That's your tokens. That's for, and I like to be careful when I say this. I remember uh, way back in the day when I had a spot on CBC every day, every Tuesday. And I remember making this point on CBC, and one woman called up and she was fit to be tied. I don't give gifts to the paper boy. Okay, that's fine. But if you do, this is where you fit in the paper boy, the person who shovels your stairs, the person who drives you to and from church. These are the tokens. That's $65. And then what's left, that's what you give to charity. Now, we find that that works, believe it or not. We find that really works. It gives people, a parameter to work within, and at the same time covers off all the bases that you need to cover off at Christmas time. So it's 70% for the people who live with you, 70% of what's left for the relationships you have in the world, 90%, I'm sorry, 70% of what's left for acknowledgements and tokens, and the balance for charity.
Wow.
Charity at Christmas time is critical. The number of groups and organizations who are counting on the generosity of strangers to help them meet their goals at Christmas time is it's absolutely unbelievable. Anything else?
I don't,
Maybe we'll
Mary.
have our, no, I was going to say, Courtney, maybe we'll have our final slides.
Sure, that's what I was just about to say. So if there's nothing else in the chat, just want to say thank you, Al. Like I feel like so many of us feel that stress around the holidays, and it's really good to get a little bit of info on ways to budget, and some of the ideas that you've offered. I've been really helpful. I found it really helpful. So if there's no more questions, I'm going to pull up just kind of final couple housekeeping slides here, and then we will be finished for the day. So just one moment. Okay. So if you need a certificate for this presentation, so if you attended as part of professional development, you can just send me an email. So that's outreach@seniorsnl.ca, and I will get one done up for you. If you wanted to become a friend of Seniors NL, so Friends of Seniors NL is an intergenerational opportunity to engage people of any age in the well-being and independence of older adults. Friends of Seniors NL will be given business cards to distribute to those they feel can benefit from Seniors NL information and referral service. And they will also have opportunities to attend presentations and workshops that Seniors NL might have in their communities. So again, my email's there at the bottom. The phone number is also there if you wanted to reach out and become a friend of Seniors NL. And then our next Let's Talk. So this is going to be on December 11th, and this is going to be about fraud with RBC. So by the end of day today, hopefully I will have the Zoom link sent out for our next Let's Talk. And again, that'll be on December 11th. And then there is just our contact information. So my email that I had listed earlier at Outreach, and then there's also info@seniorsnl, our phone number. So if anybody has any questions about anything that they heard today or they wanted contact information, you can always reach out to us at those emails. And other than that, that's everything that we have for today. So again, thank you so much, Al. Really appreciate you coming in and talking to us about everything that you spoke about today. And if there's no more questions or anything, we'll go ahead and end there for today.